Hello, I'm Joe Ruggiero, and welcome to my podcast, Inspired, and the people who inspire me. Now, we have gotten a lot of requests for gardening and landscaping, and I'm happy to say that I have one of the finest landscape designers in the business. He's been published in Architectural Digest. His firm's name is Hoffman Ospina, and I'm proud to be able to speak to Juan Ospina. Do I pronounce that properly?
Very close. My name is Juan Camilo Ospina Londoño. That is my full name, but it is Juan Ospina as I go by.
Okay. Well, welcome.
Well, thank you so much for having us here, and myself, and I mean us, my company that's always behind me, Hoffman and Ospina Landscape Architecture.
So tell me, you have been in this business sort of since you were a kid when you were born in Colombia.
I grew up in Cartago in Colombia, and it's a small farming community that focuses on coffee and sort of pineapples, and there are lots of vineyards in that region as well. And I grew up with a family that had several coffee farms and cattle ranches. So as a child, between when I was born to the age of 10, I spent a lot of time on horseback, on mules, in rivers, and all over the place with a large band of cousins. So I have two brothers, a younger and an older, and that amount of, we were one group out of 11 in my grandma's family, so there was a lot of cousins running through the farms and on horseback and trying to saddle up small animals.
Well, you're in the right place because we're at the Calabasas Country Club, as you probably
correct.
know. And there were a lot of horses being filmed here in the old days because this was a movie set where they filmed many of the early Westerns. And you would also be interested because you're an architect. They would build whole cities one-sided, but the detail of the Western towns, and then they would just knock them down and build something new. So it's kind of interesting. But let's get to the subject. And what advice, and I hate to put you on the spot, but what advice would you have for a homeowner who's gardening in California in terms of what they should concentrate on?
I think homeowners, for all sort of income, should really be focusing on the least amount of maintenance that can be done, but still having an enriched garden that you can enjoy the aspects of nature. And I do think that small little pieces of gardens around your property can bring light and life into your day. So I do think that just finding a strategy, whether it's one shrub that really makes the yard or one location of a place that a bird could gather, or you could introduce some butterflies that you'd see through your window pane as you're washing your dishes, etc., would be sort of the minimalistic ideas that I think can be done. But more from a reality standpoint, you do want to focus on having no water around your house. So it's really focusing on having a clean and organized yard, really.
Well, what are some of the drought-tolerant plants that you would recommend for California lifestyles?
You have to be very careful because plants do have a life, and they all have different sizes that they grow into. So it is being very specific in figuring out having maybe a couple of dates with different flowers or trees that you can sort of go through and understand how big they can get to ensure that that plant specifically for your area is something that you want. There's plants that are very aggressive that people don't pay attention to. They look really pretty. They've seen it somewhere else. And then 3 years from there, it's a big mistake. It's concrete's being pulled up. So it is asking the right questions, looking at where you're going to place these shrubs and trees, and thinking about where the sun is moving and how all the surrounding plants also affect it. So
Well,
There
this is where a landscape architect comes in, because he can do your plan, and you don't have to plant it all at once. But I have found that lantana, lavender, things that I never realized were drought tolerant are.
And some of those things are, but some of those things, if you're a novice, like a lavender, you really need to prune 3 times a year. Everyone wants to let them go, and then they just go. And people think they're low maintenance, but there's a cost to that low maintenance. And I don't think the cost is high for like a perennial shrub like a lavender. You can, for some of us in the industry, you have to replace these. These are sort of perennials or biennials, which maybe every 2-3 years they've got to get replaced. So I was just thinking about, again, what is working in other conditions? What gardens are you attracted to that you've seen as you drive by for the last 10 years? You've seen a garden that does so well. Well, what are those things that are working that you feel really are suited for your eye? And I think leading a plan, of course, as a landscape architect, landscape designers, or all designers, just thinking about even our laying out a bathroom space, we're all trying to think about how we're going to use that space. So having a plan is an appropriate step one.
What about grassy lawns? Are they a thing of the past out here in California?
No, I don't think grassy lawns are a thing of the past in California. I think that there are a lot of more developed grasses that do have deeper roots that require less watering if you're able to consider a staging process. Seeding, for example, will take a little bit longer to establish, but if you start from seed, that has a better chance of actually doing more successful for a long term.
As opposed to sod.
As opposed to sod. But there are some really great sod alternatives that we're utilizing. For example, is a drought succulent that's called curapia, Kurapia, curapia. And it takes, I think, it takes 40% less water than a regular lawn. And it doesn't requiring a haircut, but it's not the grass that you're going to want to play golf.
Right.
Calabasas Country Club is not going to substitute their greens for the curapia on the active places, but in non-active places, those are great solutions to lower that cost, and that has been exploited. That succulent sort of, if we look up or down our freeways, we'll see some nice succulents that have been doing really well. They do water minimal, but
right.
recycled water. So you're seeing that plants can succeed in this environment and in more drought, in hotter environments like desert environment. So it's just adaptation to plants and using the right plants.
I don't know what the Greek name is or the proper name, but I know it as society garlic. And I find that to be a charming plant. And it seems to grow like weeds. And weeds, geraniums grow like weeds in California, which I was amazed because back east they didn't. But you brought up a very interesting point, and I think that we should stress that. Garden tours, gardens that are open to the public, that really is great idea generation, right?
I think the exploration of gardens to enrich communities, meaning everything from our seniors to our youth, are very important to our health. I do find that one of those click moments in my career as a student in college, I was studying pre-med, thinking that I wanted to heal a lot of people, and I got to a moment where I found, living in New York at that moment, where I just needed to get back into the garden, and the medicine that I was learning was just a little bit outside of what I wanted to really believe in. So I turned and I realized I maybe wanted to make a shift and use gardens to heal people.
That's very interesting because the famous actress, Audrey Hepburn, always felt that gardens were therapeutic, gave her a peace of mind, a serenity. But I think it can also be energizing.
It is. I remember I lived in Fair Lawn, New Jersey, which was, in my eyes, suburbia America for this Colombian immigrant. But across the street was my Sicilian neighbor, Joe. And Joe was a Korean veteran, and Joe and Joan were these older couple doing their lawn and cleaning up their garden, and my younger brother and I, we would go and just help them. And then they would come over and help us, and they would show us all the different tools that they would have. And Joe is this real American hero to me, and his family was a big part of where I am today. But seeing that gardening shared of community between us, and on a snowy day, Joan would be out shoveling the neighbors across the street, and just seeing all of that, we would throw ourselves into that. We would throw ourselves into feeling.
It's funny that you bring that up,
garden.
and I always tease my producer, and I say that this show should be called Journeys, because everyone that I've spoken to, and in many different fields, as you know, my subjects, they all say they've had several mentors that have inspired them.
Definitely. Lots of mentors. I have a wonderful mentor to this day that when I was 19, he took me into his company, and I worked for him for 18 years, and he's still in my own business. I have my own business now out here in California with my great partner, Anna Hoffman. But this mentor of mine, Mitch Knapp from the East Coast, to this day still helps me and guides me in a way that I needed, just like Joan did across the street as she was gardening with me.
Yeah.
And to this day, hens and chicks is all I think about when I think of Joan. I think
That's
of
so
Joan
funny.
and I
I
think of
remember
hens
that.
and chicks. And
Yeah.
I think mentorship is sort of very crucial. Right now, I'm actually trying to be a really good mentor in Hollywood. I work for a nonprofit place called My Friend's Place, and I'm a volunteer martial art teacher there. But right now, at this moment, I'm actually incorporating an landscape architecture design studio for these homeless youth that we work in Hollywood with.
That's interesting.
Where Anna and I are donating money into this fund for us to be able to pay some of these kids.
And what is the name of it?
The program?
Right.
Well, the nonprofit is called My Friend's Place, but the program that I'm going to be running is a landscape architect in resident internship.
And can our listeners participate in some way? Is there a website?
My Friend's Place, just search for My Friend's Place on Instagram or on the website. You'll see them. You could obviously offer finances, but you could also come and learn to be a volunteer. And we have lots of architects, actually. Tim Barber was the gentleman who introduced me to My Friend's Place, Tim Barber Architecture. And one of his other architects, David Stone, is also one of the board members there. So we're really working on trying to really motivate some of the youth. And it's been really working out. I see a lot of interest, and I find that with support of not only my business partner, who's the president of the ICAA down in Texas, and other colleagues.
Now, spell out ICAA, because
the Institute Classical of Architecture Institute of Classical Art and Architecture.
Right.
And a lot of colleagues in that group. Someone like you've had, Eric Evans. He's been on your show before. But him and we've been talking about this program, so he's aware. And he's just been very encouraging as well.
Now, you have done some of the most glorious installations. You've been published in Architectural Digest magazine. What are some of the highlights of things that you remember as being special, the installations that you've done?
I think some of the special moments are actually the real gratitude you receive from the teams working on the projects, the clients' reactions, and then the post-care and the when you see other people react to the pictures that for all the work you and your team put in is really special.
You do a lot of structures that are very special.
We do a lot of structures. We do a lot of natural stuff. We do a lot of beautiful pools. We do everything from the outside. We do beautiful details on gates and door handles, etc. So our firm is really focusing on giving the client the full picture. We understand the hardships of construction, but we also see the reality of how a project can really turn out the right way. With proper planning, I've got 3 offices, both across the states. I've got an office here in Cali, in West Hollywood. I've got an office in Spring Branch, Texas, and we recently opened up an office in Union Square in Manhattan,
Wow.
New York in the fall. And I giggled last fall because I was sharing with Joe earlier that I grew up in New Jersey, but went to school in New York City, and we were just chit-chatting so much about the love of New York City, how much it's done for my journey. And I graduated at a city college in New York City, and I was driving down to Union Square where I spent a lot of time when I was in my youth. And I just giggled because I'm just so happy to be able to start another office and really continue what I was doing in the East Coast, which is just beautiful gardens. We love design. I think landscape architecture is so wonderful. It connects so many layers of the ugly and the beautiful parts of the world, and I think that we can make a big impact. I think there's not enough landscape architects.
Well, I think you're right. But I also believe that because this show is about information and advice, and our listeners like advice that they can use in their own property. And I can remember traveling in Japan, and I was very, very impressed by the small amount of property that the homeowners have. But they do things that are so interesting, whether it be the bonsai or whether it be nature, but in a smaller scale. What would your advice be to someone that maybe lives in an apartment and has a small terrace, or lives in a community? Well, perhaps it's a gated community, maybe not, but they are small pieces of property.
Well, I live in a very small 2-bedroom apartment in Los Angeles, but my wife has done this beautiful job on making this small space. And what she's done is she's really crafted just a lot of series of small pots with plants that are smaller in scale and easier to maintain, a lot of succulents. And it's just been more of a trial and error and see what works, but not investing so much on very large or very expensive plants. There's a lot of plants that you can clip and stick in the soil. There's a lot of succulents that you can just... My wife will rip apart a succulent garden with no care, just sticks it in the ground and puts it in pots and arranges it so well. So it is knowing a little bit about what you're doing, but also exploring and trying things out. And I think that's the part of having a small garden that's charming. Even if you fail, just trying it out just to see what life happens. So advice to me would be find that space that you want to sort of have. Find a way to make that space elegant. I find elegance to sort of never go out of style. I find elegance...
I say to my grandkids, classics.
Yeah,
Remember
and I think elegance could be just very clean with 1 or 2 items just arranged in the right position. It doesn't, or it could be a line of the same things along the same way, but simplifying life a little bit without... there is a lot of us in the business say less is more, but what does that really mean?
Right.
So I think you have to find that for yourself, what that represents. Some people really just want a platform where they can just sit and meditate. Right. And yes, maybe just a small candle is enough for that. Some of the beautiful and most wonderful artifacts that I've seen in through my journeys through Europe are very minimalistic items. There's some wonderful ways of just taking a clipping, finding a beautiful vase or a jar, something that was so wonderful that you loved, that you brought back from somewhere, where you could just stick whether it's a dead branch, a piece of driftwood, just a small clipping that may survive for a few days, and then just go back out and find another stem that you can cut, that you could bring in. And I think that brings life into it.
I think containers, you mentioned containers, so important. And I had the pleasure of going to Witchwood Pottery in England, in the Cotswolds, and they hand throw their terracotta pots. And I was very impressed by that. And I've collected a few pieces that they have. But I think that the containers, and even when I go to Trader Joe's, some of the containers are so unusual and different, and they're not very expensive. What would be your recommendation for containers?
It's a really good question. Water and minerals from soils are always oxidizing, so you've got to be really careful on what you want to really bring onto a patio or your interior space. So for interior stuff, like I think leaning in a little bit more on, to me again, is finding the right pottery that makes it special for you. And then trying to maybe cyclically having to change that out, because, you know, unfortunately some of the plants that we see in the industry are somewhat not in the right place to really be living, but we make use of pothos. Pothos, you know, the big leaf foliage is a wonderful plant, but it really wants to be outside under a ficus tree and just let it grow. Inside, it's going to take its own little shape. So you've got to give in to the plant material that you want to select. But with containers, ones that are water sealed so that nothing leaks out, you've got to be careful how much you're watering. Ones that allow water to drain, you've got to make sure you're collecting that water on those days of watering. So you have to be really conscious of what you're putting underneath that container. Are you putting it under wood floors that are either not sealed? Are you putting that on a carpet? So you've got to be really, really careful on making those choices. So I don't know if I have given you great advice, but I think you just have to be conscious.
I think you have, but I think the thing that is most interesting, and it was to me, are the different plant materials in the different growing regions. And now you have locations, office locations to service all of that. Like I can remember back east, Pachysandra was a really wonderful ground cover.
Yes.
Well, there's absolutely none of that on the West Coast.
No. You'll find them in cooler regions. But we have, for example, a job in Kona in Hawaii that we just finished.
So you traveled to Hawaii?
But over there, you can't import plants. So when I travel to Hawaii, it's about going to the nurseries and seeing their stock, and it's not what we see here in California from these amazing growers. They're amazing out there, but it's just a different mentality, and you're working with small saplings or cuttings in Hawaii in some areas when you're trying to find certain plants. They just don't exist yet.
Right.
So it's regionally, you have to go to the local regions and understand where you are. So if I'm doing a job in Washington, D.C. or Rumson, New Jersey, or if I'm traveling down to San Antonio, we've got a different mentality.
That's right.
However, for our Texas jobs, we're also bringing stuff up. We do a lot of, I'm a bit of a tree journeyman as well. Again, this is through a lot of growth in this industry, but I go shop through the entire United States for plant material for jobs when I have to travel to different parts. So we will truck over plants from Oregon all the way down to Texas because there was a shortage for a while back when we had some frost in Texas, so a lot of plant material gets moved down to Texas. So it's just finding the right plants for the right material for the right zone. And there's growers in different parts of this country, the U.S., that are growing at different temperate zones, etc. So it's just finding the right locale of plants that will succeed.
The thing that surprised me the most is we value our orchids here. And of course, we take great care of them and for interior decoration. I walked down the street of Palm Beach in Florida and just couldn't believe the orchids hanging in trees. I mean, I never realized that, but I guess that climate is, perfect for that kind of thing. And I would imagine Hawaii too.
Yeah, but you do see it in Florida where it's the homeowners just attaching the orchids on trees. It's their nest, and they're doing pretty well. They're succeeding.
Yes.
But again, it takes that impulse from us to make those arrangements work. But to your point, bringing in plants like an orchid to giving that to someone or just bringing it to your home, again, it's bringing that sort of that mentality of bringing green goods into your life, where for the health of your overall maintenance of your health is important to be around plant materials.
Do you believe in talking to your plants?
No, I don't. It's not about talking to the plants, but there is a synergy.
Environment.
There is definitely, we are surrounded by living organisms. They are living, so there is movement of chemistry underneath our feet all the time. There's obviously decay that's happening all the time, and there's new growth. So we are in those cycles. If you really feel or see it all, we're really surrounded by vibrancy. So it's not about talking to plants, but it is being cautious on not running over tree roots.
Right.
So it is a synergy. So I do believe that I've had doctors say to me, "How do you know that that plant is going to survive? Like, what gives you the knowledge that you're?" This was a doctor asking me this question.
You have to nurture.
Yeah, but it is also just, it's experience. We all have done this before. That's why we hire professional architects to do certain things. We hire certain professionals to do certain things because we just have an experience in that. But I think for a homeowner to understand that plant life around you, interior-wise or exterior-wise, is important. And sometimes you don't really have to do a lot around your surrounding area. You were asking me, what could somebody do? There's so many beautiful plants and trees just in our neighborhoods of just walking around and just admiring the seasonal changes, which...
I think crepe myrtle is one of the most beautiful trees because even when it doesn't have its leaves or its blossoms, it still is a beautiful tree.
Beautiful bark, beautiful
Right,
foliage,
beautiful bark.
nice form, if they're pruned properly.
That is
Sometimes,
correct.
If you get a butcher to butcher your crepe myrtle and the crepe myrtle on that winter season doesn't look as great. So you do have to have, again, just the knowledge of plant material, knowledge of having the right professionals to prune trees.
Arborists.
Arborists, yes. Again, there is a science and a philosophy to taking care of trees, and it's the wonderful chance that I've had to work with so many professionals, arborists, horticulturists, master pruners that I'm bringing in, and I'm working with farming companies, people that are just, their niche is, I'm a farmer, I want to take care of vegetables and fruits, and I can do that differently than a guy who's just cutting the grass and blowing the leaves.
What about a
etc.
vegetable garden?
Vegetable gardens are very tricky. Super difficult.
My daughter, who's married to a Frenchman,
Yes.
she had a potager. And of course, she loved it because she could pick her herbs, she could
Yes.
pick her fresh vegetables and prepare her foods because she's a great cook. But to be able to create that, my dad was Sicilian and he loved to have a vegetable garden. Is that concern for homeowners coming back like the old Victory Garden in World War II? Seems like people are planting tomatoes, planting some herbs.
Right.
And do you see that as a trend happening?
I want to be very honest. I think that I did several years of community gardens, trying to grow my own vegetables and trying to surround myself of learning and wanting to be the best landscape architect. And I do admit that it's hard. It's hard to combat the squirrels. It's hard to combat the white
Pesticides.
flies, to be organic, right?
Right.
So I was trying really hard to focus on not spraying and using neem oil but again, there's days where you just can't fight the weather and the squirrel and
The
it's
gophers.
very the gophers here, the squirrels here are so difficult, and why certain things are maybe working in better direction with some of these hydroponic systems that you're seeing are actually working. There's communities and schools throughout the United States now that are using a lot of indoor hydroponic systems where they're growing a lot of good crops without chemicals.
Let's talk about hydroponic because many of my listeners are not
Right.
pros. That is the nurturing with water.
Yeah, you're allowing the trees to feed on water direct without the use of nutrients of soil, but you are required to have a lot of light, so you do need a lot of specific light for plant growth. But there's even supermarkets now in the United States that are also growing their own crops right in the supermarkets with those systems as well. So I think there's really good hope for that. I do think that because of pesticides, it's very difficult to maintain some of these gardens, and your regular day-to-day landscape contractor that comes to cut the grass they're not designed to be your farmers. They are not farmers. If you want to have a successful farming, I think getting involved with groups and communities that are in community gardens that are successful. For example, there's these wonderful community gardens at the Waddles Mansions, and you can go take tours and learn about permaculture. I was in Sweden this year, and at a park in Sweden, there was a group of farmers, and they were showing me their permaculture for their community garden. And I thought it was really beautiful. It's just community people meeting up and talking about it and trying to grow vegetables together. So it is a specialized area for our residentials. I don't think that... I think herbaceous things like spearmint and mints and all that stuff are super easy, but harder vegetables, I think some of the bigger fruits and stone fruits, you can do also in smaller gardens. Let's look at espalier trees.
Exactly, espalier being trained to grow on a wall.
Yes, and we have wonderful trees here in California that you could buy in a reasonable price to have small trees like lemons. You could have pomegranates. You can have several little fruits. There's some peaches and apricots that they're growing in little tiny espaliers. So you could do little micro gardens.
That's
I
good
think
advice.
The big gardens is very, very difficult and very hard without a real punch of a lot of time, a lot of maintenance, and a lot of labor.
Now, when you do an installation, do you bring mature trees? That's a massive project, isn't it? Digging the hole and keeping it.
Well, it's the process of actually finding large trees, finding the right transportation, finding the right client that can afford to move a large tree, getting permits, getting cranes, machines, etc. It's a bit of a process. And like I said to you, as a journeyman in finding plants with the help of other professionals in this business, we are able to move large trees. I've planted 100-plus-year-old olive trees in several yards throughout California. And I'm really thankful to also have the opportunity of bringing in large, mature California oaks and trees like that, because they're very good for our environment. I don't see negatives in bringing in large materials when we can. And it also moves the needle for the economy when we have several bands of contractors all in support of trying to plant one tree in this beautiful garden. It adds a lot to the whole scene, not only for the client, but for the contractors, the workers. Everyone gets this really resurgence of, oh my God, we're seeing a really large, mature tree being planted at this garden right away. And it makes the scene for the architects.
It's absolutely
for
true.
the homeowners.
Juan, you are so interesting and interested in so many different things. How you travel a lot, you travel the world, you travel to your offices, you also manage to teach physical activity, right?
Yes, sir.
How do you keep the engine going?
Well, I have a wonderful wife. Andrea is a big support. And
Important.
Yes, and it's just her and I, so we don't have children. But we have a great staff. I have a great business partner, Anna Hoffman, who helps tremendously. We're just a really great balance for each other. And then we have a wonderful staff of professional landscape architects. So I do have landscape architects on our squad, a lot of seniors. So it's a very respectable group of individuals that are very professional. So we are very self-reliant on each other, and that allows us to be able to see other work. And we do have pre-COVID, our company was already across the states. We just found several of us who were really in tune to what we love to do. And there's three female landscape architects in our office who, Anna Hoffman, I mentioned, two others, Jen and Susie, who've been friends, and they've been working on large projects across the world in the United Kingdom They also did work in Dubai together, and they're all part of the same company now.
Wow, that's fascinating.
This is 20 years ago, and they're still together, and they're part of the company. As Anna and I partner up, we started bringing in really high-end seniors, and another one of our seniors, Dan Parenti, runs our New York office. And then we've got just two young up-and-coming, close to UCLA graduated landscape architects, soon to be. So we're really looking to bring in professional senior support. We find that we can support any contractor, any architect because of our experience throughout. So it's a lot of experience.
I know that you're well respected, and I could talk to you for another hour, to tell you the truth. But in closing, I would like to ask you because this show is called Inspired, what really inspires you? Your travel, your background, your love of nature? What is it that keeps the engine going?
The goodness in humanity is really what keeps me going. I try to find beauty in the worst of things, and I have a hope for humanity. So I do art, and I do art through my landscape architecture, but I just hope to beautify at least a moment for somebody's day. So that's really keeps me going. I paint art also just to inspire things and just to motivate people. I want to motivate a lot of youth because I think there's opportunities for us all in this beautiful world. So it keeps me going. Just the love of humanity and wanting to make it better is really what
good advice. And I really want to say to our listeners that I will be publishing some of your gorgeous photographs of projects that you've been working on in my Instagram posts and my other social networks, so they'll be able to see your talent, even though they can't see it right now. Thank you again, Juan. Thanks for sharing this information
so much, Joe.
with us.
This has been a wonderful experience. I cheer you for your opportunity to allow us to come speak, and I look forward to hearing the rest of your other guests. Thank you so much, Joe.
Well, keep up the good work.
Thank you.